Order Squamata. This is a reptilian order that includes snakes and lizards, and they come under the subclass Diapsida. Among reptiles, they are the most recent because they have appeared in the late Jurassic period, and in terms of abundance and species diversity, they are the most dominant of all reptiles. The skull is diapsidan, but it is a modified kind, because in typical diapsidan skull there are two fossae, that is the supratemporal and the infratemporal fossa, but in order Squamata, in most of the lizards, you can see that only the supratemporal fossa will be remaining. The bones, the dermal bones, which are seen posterior and ventral to the infratemporal fossa, are lost, and because of that the dermal bones are lost, and because of that the infratemporal fossa will not appear and will not be seen, is not visible outside, and only the supratemporal fossa is remaining. So this is considered to be a modified diapsidan skull. In some lizards and in all the snakes, both the fossae are absent. So as it was mentioned earlier, the squamate skull, it is modified from the diapsid skull by the loss of dermal bones which are ventral and posterior to the infratemporal opening, and because of this property they have got a special adaptation which is called as kinases or cranial kinases, that is, the skull is having movable joints, so they have evolved to be possessing movable joints in the skull, and so the skull is said to be kinetic, which will assist them in catching hold of the prey with their mouth, and they can manipulate the prey with their jaws, and the closing of the mouth is also applied with more force. And this phenomenon or cranial kinases, it is the ability of the upper jaw to move in relation to the rest of the cranium, whereas in the case of mammals, the skull is said to be akinetic because the upper jaw is completely fused to the cranium, and it cannot move in relation to the rest of the skull. Whereas this is not the case with squamates, that is, the upper jaw is able to move in relation to the rest of the cranium. So what advantage it is having because of this kinases? This allows it to increase the gape of the mouth when it is open, so it can keep its mouth wide open, and it is also an adaptation to improve capturing of prey with the jaws and also handling of the prey with the jaws. And contrary to the chelonians and crocodiles who were possessing monomostylic or immovable quadrate, the squamates possess movable or streptostylic quadrate. So that makes them different from crocodilians and chelonians who have got immovable quadrate. The lizards and snakes are having streptostylic or movable quadrate or the upper jaw. Then the jaw suspension is autostylic, which is typical of all reptiles, and the teeth, in some it may be acrodont and in some pleurodont teeth will be seen, whereas in chelonians there are no teeth, it is edentulous condition. In crocodilians the teeth are thecodont, whereas in order Squamata the teeth can be either acrodont or pleurodont. So this is one diagram which shows the kinases of the skull in an ancient squamate, in an ancestral squamate and a snake. This shows that the mouth can be kept wide open because of cranial kinases, and these are the different types of kinases, that is different directions of movement of the upper jaw in relation to the rest of the cranium. So these are the different types of kinases, the metakinases, mesokinases and prokinases. Another feature of squamates is the presence of horny epidermal scales covering the body. The scales are derived from the epidermal layer of the skin. Here you can see the different types of modified scales. So this is also a feature of Squamata. The vertebrae are procoelous, that means the centrum of the vertebra is anteriorly concave and posteriorly convex. Whereas in lizards, in house lizards or geckos, the vertebrae are amphicoelous, that means on either side the centrum will be concave. So that is a condition which is seen in gecko or wall lizard, whereas in other squamates the vertebrae are procoelous with anteriorly concave centrum. Then the tongue is also specialized in squamates. In certain lizards the tongue is broad at the tip, which helps in grasping and seizing the prey. Example, the iguanid squamates. uh, they are fleshy for manipulation and swallowing in some forms, and in some forms it is broad at the base for pushing the prey into the esophagus. So, tongue is variously modified in different types of lizards, and it is highly specialized for prey capturing. Now, they have got a smell perceiving organ which is called as Jacobson's organ or vomeronasal organ. It not only assists them in olfaction, but it also helps in testing the quality of food which is held in the mouth. Then the cloacal opening. Unlike the chelonians and crocodiles who had longitudinal cloacal openings, the squamates are having transverse cloacal opening. So, this is one feature, that is the snakes and lizards are having a transverse cloacal opening. Now, the copulatory organs in males. In all the reptiles, the fertilization is internal. So, the sperms are transferred from the body of the male into the body of the female through copulatory organs. In chelonia and crocodilia, the copulatory organs are single, whereas in squamates, the copulatory organs are paired. And these paired erectile copulatory organs are called as hemipenis. Then in order Squamata, there are three suborders, that is Lacertilia, which includes lizards, Ophidia, which includes snakes, and a third suborder which is called Amphisbaenia, which includes burrowing lizards with hidden eyes. So, this is an example of an Amphisbaenian, and this is another which is also called as the blind worm lizard. In some forms there are no limbs, but there are limbs in some other forms of Amphisbaenia. Now, the subclass Lacertilia. This includes the lizards. So, what are the characteristic features of lizards? The ribs of lizards are single-headed with only capitulum, and the tuberculum is absent. Then, the tail of lizards is modified to subserve different types of functions. In certain lizards, the tail is long and whip-like, which is defensive in function, which will help in offending the prey or enemy or defending from other predators. Whereas in some forms, it is seen as short and globose tail, which can act as a storehouse of nutrients, as we can see in the leopard gecko. In some forms like chameleon, the tail is prehensile. It is this animal is able to coil its tail on tree branches, which is an arboreal or tree living adaptation for that animal. So, the tail in lizards is modified for performing different types of functions. One of the most important features seen in the tail of lizards is autotomy or self mutilation or caudal autotomy. Auto means by own and tomy is cutting. So, they are able to cut their tail when attacked, and their brightly colored tails will break off and this tail will wriggle for a few minutes, and this will distract the enemy or the attacker, and by this time the lizard is able to escape. This is called as self mutilation or self cutting or autotomy, and this is shown by certain lizards like iguana, skink, the wall lizard or gecko species, etc. In those organisms, the tail is not essential for survival. So, what happens is that on encounter with the enemy or the predator, they will just cut off the tail will wriggle down, and by that time they escape, and later the lost tail part will be regenerated. Whereas in some organisms, some lizards like chameleons and monitors, for them they are arboreal or tree living forms. So, they will totally depend upon their tail for climbing and also for defense purpose. So, they cannot shed their tails. Similarly, the marine iguana, it uses its tail as a large oar or rudder for swimming. So, in them also such type of autotomy cannot be seen. Autotomy is usually seen in those lizards where the tail is not so essential for survival, and the examples are iguana, skink, gecko species, etc. Then coming to the ear, they do not possess external ear, and the ear starts from the tympanum. But in certain burrowing and desert forms of lizards, the ears are concealed by overlapping scales, and this can also be seen in the snakes. the tympanum is not visible outside and they are covered by overlapping scales, and this feature is also seen in certain lizards. The tongue, just like the tail, the tongue is also variously modified. You take the case of calotis or a skink, where you can see that the tongue is flat and notched. It has got a notch. It is flat also. So this is a blue-tongued skink, where you can see a notched flat tongue. This is the same as in the case of calotis. Here in Varanus, you can see, this is monitor lizard or Varanus, where you can see the tongue is bifid or like a fork. Whereas in Chameleon, the tongue is club shaped. Here this is the tongue, and it is protrusible to capture the prey, as well as it is retractile. It can be taken back into the mouth. So by this we can see that the tongue is also variously modified in different types of lizards. Now in most of the forms, oviparity is the rule, that is they are egg laying forms, and the growing embryos are protected inside amnion, the extraembryonic membrane, and usually no parental care will be shown for the eggs or the young ones. Going to some representatives of Lacertilia, this is the calotis or the garden lizard. You can see the neck and the trunk assuming crimson color during the breeding season in male, and this is female. This is the chameleon, which shows camouflage or color change according to the surroundings, and you can see the prehensile tail which can be coiled around the tree branches, which is a tree living adaptation of chameleon. This is Barcodia, the burrowing lizard. You can see the house lizard or wall lizard, gecko, which is specialized in having adhesive pad like structures on the digits which help them in climbing the walls. This is Draco or flying lizard, which possesses a patagium or a parachute like structure that helps in short flights. This is the poisonous lizard, which is also called as Heloderma, which is the only poisonous lizard. Here you can see some desert lizards like Euromastix, which is specialized for water storage, Moloch horridus, which has got a hygroscopic skin which is able to absorb moisture. This is Phrynosoma or horned toad. Even though it is called as toad, it is actually coming under Reptilia. So these are some examples of desert lizards. This is sea iguana, which is adapted to live in sea water, and its scientific name is Amblyrhynchus cristatus. This is Tropidophorus, which is seen in mountain streams. So we can see that most of them are terrestrial forms, but still you can find some other habitats such as the sea water, mountain streams, etc. This is monitor gecko, which is the smallest non-lizard, which grows to a maximum length of 34 millimeter. It is found in West Indies. Its scientific name is Pterodactylus parthenopean. This is the largest non-lizard. It is Varanus komodoensis. It is also called as the Komodo monitor or the Komodo dragon.